So I originally went into this thinking that this idea was going to be kind of contrived because I wanted to build a Toa Nidhiki in the same vein as Likhan, because Likhan and Nidhiki in my Bionicle story both serve as protectors of an object on Metru Nui called the Sigil. It's not important for the sake of this video. And I really thought going into this that this was just going to kind of look bland, boring, be contrived, because it's essentially just a carbon copy of Likhan, but in Nidhiki's form. However, I've put it together and I like it a lot. I think it looks really good. It's not doing it justice on the camera here because my camera does not do a great job of picking up greens. As you can tell, it kind of mutes them at the color correction thing, right? But with that said, though, I think it looks really exceptional in all honesty. Same weapons as Likhan. The main reason I justified having the same weapons is because later in my story, the essence of characters like these end up also getting shields, right? Duma, his essence turns into Norik, who gets a shield, and obviously Nidhiki's essence turns into Iruni, who gets a shield. And so it just made sense that characters who serve as protectors of this specific item get these shields as their tools, right? Well, anyway, we already know that Likhan uses it as a sort of lava board for a secondary function, and so I figured with Nidhiki, you can tilt the head back. He's an air-based Toa after all, right? And you can flip the swords back a bit so that you can position him in a sort of gliding pose. Kind of similar to how it works with Toa Nuva Liwa, right? But obviously he's not flipping his arms completely upside down, so I think that ends up working out pretty well overall. And I think it looks really good, honestly. Like, yeah, it's not the most, probably aerodynamic aesthetic by any means, but I do think that it's convincing enough, and I can suspend my disbelief enough to think that he can glide with this. My thing is that he doesn't necessarily fly, right? But he glides, and one of the reasons for that is because A, he's not wearing like a mask of flight or a mask of levitation or anything like that, and flight in and of itself is not an inherent capability of these characters as Toa, right? Maybe, he could summon like an updraft or something to lift him up. He is a Toa of air with air elemental powers, and so maybe that updraft can help to keep him sustained in his glide, but at the end of the day, he has gliding power otherwise. Or again, not power, he's carrying a weapon that enables him to glide. That's the main difference. So my thought too, following this logic, is that since Duma was a Toa at one point, even before these characters here, that he would also get an aesthetic kind of like this. However, he is not a protector of the Sigil, so he's not going to look exactly the same, and also he, at the time, was a Toa of light, rather than a Toa of fire. In my story, he starts off as a Toa of light. He gets corrupted by Makuta, giving him that color scheme that we all know with the red and black, right? But initially, he starts out in his Turaga form, as I've shown off, in this Keat Orange. Why? Just because Keat Orange is a color that was introduced back in 2005 or at least in in Bionicle in 2005, right? And it was sort of like the Metru yellow, if you want to call it that. And so it is a color that's inherently Metru in its its origin, right? And so I wanted it to be something that really signified this character, right? Because Nidhiki or Norik Duma, that one is important as the leader of Metru Nui, and so giving him a color scheme that's also important made a lot of sense for me. Anyway, so Likhan's a Toa of fire, Nidhiki is a Toa of air, and Duma is a Toa of light. So my thought right now is that Duma's color scheme is probably going to be something akin to gold and white, a traditional light color scheme. Potentially even like pearl gold would be fun to mess around with. But at the end of the day, we would never have seen Iruni as a toy. At least that's not a toy that I introduced in my own story. Maybe there's a possibility of having Iruni as a special edition set in 2005 or something like that. I keep saying Iruni. Nidhiki, right? And still getting Iruni, still getting Norik as non-special edition sets, since they now play a major role in the story. But overall, by the time we're introduced to the 2004 story of mine, the flashback, Nidhiki has already been kidnapped. He's already in the possession of Turaga Duma, and so he doesn't play a role in the story in his Toa form. He only plays a role in his Dark Hunter form that we end up getting, which I'm just calling the Beast form for now, because different origin in my story. Anyway, so that's the build in a nutshell. If you are interested in learning more about that story too, I have posted not only a pinned comment in the Your Creation section of the Discord server, which is free to join, by the way. You can do so down in the description below. But also you can watch the previous videos where I actually talked about these at some length. I did not go into all the detail that I could because, for one, I'm still working on the story in my own mind and sort of patching different aspects of it or changing different aspects of it. But overall, I'm very happy with where it is at right now. And for the most part, what my story aims to do is clean up the lore, clean up a lot of the like loose threads that are kind of unimportant, let's be honest, because I have had, and this is not a knock on commenters because we all have our preferences, right? But I've had a lot of people, a handful of people, who have criticized my story for removing specific characters that they liked, or saying that keeping up with like different stories would be too complicated with them happening at the same time. Because in my story, for example, the Toa Nuva are on Metro Nui around the same time as the Toa Inika are on Voya Nui. And I came up with a bit of story yesterday, which kept me up for like literally an hour and a half writing, as to how the Toa Inika even become a thing. But anyway, outside of this, yes, that would be two stories going on at the same time, but I think Lego can handle that kind of stuff because we've already seen it. There's precedent for it anyway in the Bionicle story. So all I'm doing is shelling these two stories that are happening at the same time for the same purpose, right? One team, the Toa Inika, are going after the Mask of Life, whereas the Toa Nuva are going after the Sigil of Matanui to bring the two together to reawaken Matanui. But they also are not aware that Makuta, whose mask was taken by Matanui before the Great Cataclysm finished up, before he went to sleep, has now had like decades upon decades of time to essentially corrupt Matanui's unconscious body, for lack of a better term, right? Which is why in 2008, when they do awaken Matanui finally at the end, he gets taken over by Makuta. We've already set precedent that Makuta is capable of doing this through his own mask, so it just makes sense that he could continue to do it here. Yeah, you could ask the question, well, why didn't Matanui think of that? Why didn't Matanui get rid of the mask if that was the case? And quite frankly, my thought right now is that Matanui wasn't aware that he had that ability. But that's just a thought, and that could change too. You know, like I said, it's an evolving story, so I'm pretty happy with it. But that said, if you are interested in checking that out, that is linked down in the description below on the Discord server, which I'd be more than happy if you guys want to check it out. We're very welcoming of the newcomers that have been coming because of the channel, actually. On top of that, the Patreon and Instagram are both down there as well. If you want to support the channel, that's up to you. And of course, as always, make sure to like and subscribe, I guess. Anyway, that's it. Take care.